TSM, formerly known as Team Solo Mid, is one of the most famous League of Legends organizations in the world. They have won the most LCS titles of any LCS team at 6. They have been in the most finals at 12. They are equally, though, I would say, infamous for their failures at the World Championship in League of Legends. In 7 appearances from Season 2 through to Season 10, one time they got out of the groups, the high point of their entire international career at Worlds, and hence this video, because even when they got out of groups, there was a little bit more nuance and shading that you need to put in there rather than just say they made the quarterfinals. Now, TSM fans, players, I've heard a number of different groups contend that it's just because they got Samsung White in the round of 8, the team that obviously went on to win the tournament, was the best team, arguably the favourite, if not the second best team there. That's the only thing that prevented them from going further, making the semi-finals, or maybe more. That's the simple version, right? Sometimes people might also point out, oh, you know, like, they were winning a game against Samsung White, and then, you know, who knows what could have happened in the fourth. The point is, if you look at overall series, again, there's more context than just that. Of like, well, we won a game, and if you can win one game, you can win more. I think that's even what Jack might have said in the Samsung White analysis, if you remember, after they won a game. Something like, if they can win one game, they can win 3, even though we're talking about winning it in the context of a best of 5, not if you play a million games, Jack. But okay, one of those ones I wasn't a huge fan of on the desk. I get where people are coming from. Now, Amazing, someone I actually now like and work on shows with, do my big brain show, etc., he came on Summoning Insight, and he'd already said this on Twitter, I believe, but he suggested basically you could sort of retcon the whole tournament. That if you started in the group stage, that if they'd beaten Starhorn Royal Club in the first game like he thinks they should have, or if they'd prepared differently, then if they'd beaten SK in the second game, when, you know, in that scenario again, they should have, and that would have forced a tiebreaker with Starhorn Royal Club if they hadn't beaten Royal Club the first time. Otherwise, it wouldn't have mattered. They'd have gotten out of the group in first place. Either way, he saw it as they should have come first place in the group. By coming to first place in the group, you don't play Samsung White. You go on the other side of the bracket, which was all the Chinese teams, and then Najin White Shield. So you would have played EDG in the round of 8, the champions of the LPL. You would have played OMG, because it turned out the opposite, Najin White Shield. First non-Western, non-Korean team to beat a Korean team in a best-of-5 series at a tournament like Worlds. And then in the OMG was a team that turned out, obviously, to have fabulous top side of the map, some very strong players, and a really crazy mentality. Now, the most extreme version of this, essentially, if you've been tracking what I said at the end there, is Samsung White would have won Worlds, but TSM would have been second at Worlds behind only Samsung White. So let's go through this contextually. And if people haven't noticed, I'm on a little kick right now where I'm trying to like retcon a bunch of narratives that I think have been fucked with themselves back to what I think they appropriately should be contextually. And I might even start a new series. I'm thinking to call it something like Narrative Mechanic. I'll probably start it instead of just these being one-off Thorin thoughts. I think it'd be a pretty cool series. There's plenty we can go through. So what we'll do here is we're going to go back in time and we're going to look at the Wikipedia. It's not Wikipedia in this case though, is it? So here we go, because most of this info is on the left, by the way. I'm down here on the right. So let's go through this. Here's the issue, right? We got to go back before we start, lads, to Season 4 Summer in the LCS, because a lot of people won't know this detail. Maybe this could be a video one day. TSM wasn't looking like a contender to win the title until the very end of the split. And even then it was questionable. Because here's what we have here. So look at TSM. This is TSM's summer lineup. They have Dyrus still in the top lane. They have Amazing, who came in and had been here for only this split as a jungler. He'd been Copenhagen Wolves in Europe previously. Bjergsen's still there, superstar player. They got Wild Turtle, very good AD carry. And they had a guy called Glebe for the first 9 weeks out of the 11 weeks of the split. And guess what? Let's go look where they were after 9 weeks, shall we? After 9 weeks, they're tied for a 3-way tie for second place, which sounds pretty good. But if you looked into who they beat, they were farming the bottom teams, the worst teams. And they weren't actually winning many games of the top teams. They'd won very few compared to the other teams in this top 4 teams at this point in time. So at that point, there's plenty of reasons to think TSM won't win the split. Maybe they don't even go to Worlds. Who knows? You've got LMQ, you've got Cloud9. CLG was still strong before they went to Korea. You had Dignitas was pretty solid and had led the league at one point in time. You have TSM, they're just sort of catching up at this point. But here's the thing. Loco pulled his strings. Out went Glebe, who apparently it would appear had some sort of mental issues. I won't comment on what they are. I don't know myself. It just seemed that he had some sort of issues that he went through, and he had to be removed from the team, or they chose to, rather. And they brought in Lost Boy, a fucking OGN champion, one of the players who, even a split earlier, had been playing in one of the best teams in Korea, a team making top 4 in OGN. And he comes in and plays in week 10 and week 11. Still isn't that great, by the way. They win 3, they lose 3. They end the split as you can see down here, they managed to finish in 3rd place overall, but they're 2 games behind LMQ and Cloud9. And quite frankly, at this point in time, Cloud9 and LMQ are the teams you expect to win. Cloud9 had won loads against the top teams, and LMQ, as you can see here, they'd been a top team for the majority of the split, and they'd now led the split for 2 weeks towards the end. They started out like that, and here we go. So as you can see, look at the only team of all these elite teams that doesn't lead the LCS. You have LMQ at the top, Dignitas at the top, CLG at the top for loads of weeks, LMQ at the top, and it ends with Cloud9 at the top. And remember, Cloud9 were the clutch kings, and at this point, we're on 2 straight LCS titles. So then you go into the playoffs very quickly. Okay, playoffs run very, very close. Here's what happens. They played Dignitas in the first round. 3-1 sounds like it's not that close, right? Game 1 was a mega fiesta. I think Game 2 was like that. Basically, Amazing himself described it later as a clown fiesta. Like, it wasn't a great series. Then he himself even said, you know, they probably should have lost to LMQ. It's a 5-game series. They sneak through that. They get to play Cloud9 in the final, the team that's beaten them in the last 2 finals. Admittedly, Bjergsen wasn't there for the first one. And although they swept them in the one where Bjergsen was there, but it's first ever split in the LCS. And you see, it's a 5-game series, and people remember the infamous Wild Turtle. I think, wasn't it like a Tristana crit, where he just basically got a crazy kill off. And in that scenario, or was it the other way around? Let me think. I can't remember. Anyway, basically, I can't remember if he was on Twitch or Tristana, which way around it was. But basically, he has like a crazy crit, and they win the key fight in Game 5, and as a result, TSM wins the championship. But by an absolute sliver, a hair, a tiny amount. I won't just go and say luck, because at the end of the day, luck goes both ways in these matches. It's team fights at the end of the day. But they didn't win conclusively. They didn't even make the finals conclusively. But you know what? They get the top seed. Fair enough. The point is, though, they've had a 4-game series with Dig, that's a Clown Fiesta, 5-game with LMQ, 5-game with Cloud9. They didn't see a dominant force from TSM with Lost Boy initially domestically, nor, beyond some good team fighting and some Bjergsen pop-offs, in general in LCS, have you seen a dominant force or a team that was looking so dangerous? So now, when we go and talk about Worlds, let's understand this. All the Worlds, like speculation that they could have done this and beat this team and be better, is all based on Scrims. It's all based on the hype of what they did in Scrims, or stories that they have from that, or what they thought about their Scrims, even if, by the way, they lost the Scrims, just how they thought they were doing at certain points of the game and how that should have translated MMA math style to other people. So I'll just say this, aside from when you get those cheeky leaks that always show the Western team doing well against the top Asian team and all the hype, I'll just say this. I've heard stories that Korean teams in those scrims sometimes just fuck with you. Maybe in this case, because Amazing suggests otherwise later, they weren't eventually. But I've heard, like, first games, sometimes they'll just purposely pick off meta champions, or they'll pick shit that they think's weaker against you to just draw out all your strong picks, and then see how you do on them, and then figure out how to crush you. And you might think, oh, doing well in a couple of these, we lost, but it was close. And you don't know, any minute they could just drop the hammer and fucking end your life, basically, in the game. And that essentially, you won't be getting many more scrims if they beat you with those kind of circumstances. Bizarrely, it'll just all dry up. But I thought we were doing well. And then they'll start picking the real champs, and then they'll just crush you and go, yeah, that's it. You know what, we're busy at that scrim block. So I'll say I've always thought scrims often meant very little in that regard. My analogy, if anyone's an old school Counter-Strike 1.6 fan, would be in NA when we had the big CPLs, the World Championships, there was a famous boot camp like a week before at a thing called Lethal Gamers, and basically it was infamous. Loads of the NA teams would attend, and a couple of the Europeans, and it didn't matter how many times, it happened loads of times, an NA team would like win that boot camp or look amazing in that boot camp and beat everyone. How many times, you wouldn't believe how many times the winner didn't even place top 8 at the CPL, because that's just how different the environment is. Some people play to win in scrims, some people play to learn, some people play to be experimental. There's a million factors at play. Some people are just good in scrims and not good on stage and in world, under the big lights, under the pressure, right? So that's just the way the game goes. That's the way sports has always been, quite frankly. There's people in practice can drain like 15 threes in a row. They can't make bloody 3 in a game. Now, let's go then to the group at Worlds, shall we? So first and foremost, we have to ask, how did they end up with their group? So, okay, because for some reason Wikipedia, Gamepedia at that point in time doesn't actually have the pools that you're in. You have to know which one went in. I've had to go with Wikipedia for this one, boys. So let's just look, because I'll very quickly show you. So they were in a group here, Group B. It was TSM, Starhorn Royal Club, SK Gaming, Taipei Assassins. TSM ends up coming out in second place. So how did they get in that group? Well, let's look. So, North America, number 1 seed, Pool 1. TSM is a Pool 1 team. That means, here are the other Pool 1 teams. Alliance, Samsung White, Samsung Blue, and EDG. So that means, basically, that they can't get Alliance, EDG, Samsung Blue. Samsung Blue was the team that had won one championship in Korea and was in Game 5 of the second championship and was the dominant team. EDG had won both splits in China and a bunch of other competitions as well. And Alliance had been top 4 in the first split in spring, had won convincingly with a 75% win rate against every team in Europe, and were looking really strong. So actually, you know, some of those teams you do want to avoid potentially, particularly Samsung Blue and EDG, because those were considered top 4 teams going into this tournament. Now, they draw Thorin Royal Club, basically Uzi I's team, think of Royal Club, later on RNG. It was slightly different teams, they actually swapped over their rosters, etc. But just think of it as a similar concept from the org. So basically, they're playing against the Uzi I, but remember, in second zero. So they have 2 Koreans there, they're not speaking English. It's a weird scenario, but they draw Thorin Royal Club as their Pool 2 team. Now, that's actually not even that unlucky, even though you will now know that, guess what? They end up coming second in the whole tournament. So how's that not that unlucky, Thorin? Well, here's why. Because if you go and look down here, you'll see that Thorin Royal Club finished second in the regional final, right? EDG won because they were far and away the best team. What people might not know is that it was actually a shock that Thorin Royal Club finished second there. Most people expected that to be OMG. They were actually considered the 3rd, maybe even the 4th best team. There's other teams people thought had a chance to get in. But they shocked everyone in the regionals, and everyone knows now, after this tournament, they get the Worlds buff when it's Uzi I and when it's Thorin Royal Club. Things just bizarrely work better at Worlds. So at the time you draw them, remember, these are Pool 2 teams. Is it that crazy? Because remember, in Pool 2, this could have been Samsung White, the favourite, even though they hadn't won any of the OGNs. This could actually have been Najin White Shield, also in Pool 2. The team that had won the regional, they'd been in the final of spring, they'd played the winner in the round of 8 of summer, they'd had to run through the regional. Now listen, I know now people know Najin White Shield bombs it in the round of 8 and even lost games to Alliance. Yeah, we know that now, but we didn't at the time. So at the time, actually getting Thorin Royal Club out of these Asian teams, if you'd drawn those Asian teams in that particular draw, that's actually one of the better ones. That's actually one you'd won. Yes, they eventually end up being dangerous. Then, get ready for their other draw. They then draw the other Pool 2 team, so you're going to naively think, oh, right, SK Gaming. It must have been Taipei Assassins as like the wild card type team. But SK Gaming, they must be Pool 2, right? No. SK Gaming is Pool 3. So they then draw is their other Pool 2 team, Taipei Assassins, the champion of, in this case, it says GPL, right? Obviously, we hadn't got the LMS at that point in time. Now, here's the thing. That is incredibly lucky. Because obviously, at this point, since Taipei Assassins in Season 2, the teams from this region haven't done much at Worlds. They haven't been that relevant, really. This could have been Fnatic from Europe with Expeke and Soaz and Reckless. This could have been, let's see who else. You can't have Cloud9 because they're from your region. You've already joined Star Royal Club, so it can't be OMG. Who else could it be? It could be Najin White Shield, a team that a lot of people would be scared of. It could have been them. Yeah, basically, in this world, you could have had some really dangerous teams. You could have had the 2 Korean teams there. Or Fnatic. This group, by the way, could have been TSM, Thorin Royal Club, and Samsung White. By the way, you getting out of that group, are you? I don't fucking think so. Now, with that said, I will say, because I think TPA was the weakest of the Pool 2 teams, when you go to the Pool 3, we're going to go the other way. They actually got unlucky getting SK Gaming, the Pool 3 here, because they were the best of the eligible teams. So let's look here. You couldn't have had LMQ, they're from your region. Kaboom and Dark Passage were the other 2 teams, and obviously we know Kaboom won a game off Alliance, but in bullshit fashion. Now you have to realise, those are easily teams that you're supposed to just rinse. So getting SK at the end, yeah, that's a little bit unlucky. Yeah, that could be tricky. They're a dark horse to take a game off you at this point in time. But even so, overall, a very, very good group. Like, look at it. You've avoided all the Korean teams. This is Season 4. This is when the Koreans are the best, when nobody's close. You've avoided every Korean team. You've got theoretically the worst Chinese team. And on top of that, you go down here, you have no super shit team, sure, but you got SK Gaming, who you should be, and TPA, essentially, also, if you're a top team, should be fodder. So this group, you should definitely be getting out of this group. And yes, the discussion should be, do you win the group, right? This is a chance to win the group if you're an NA team. When the fuck do they ever do that, right? So then, we go on. And before the games can even begin, that SK Gaming team that's dangerous to win a game or so, they already are crippled because SK Gaming's star jungler, arguably the best player in the team, Sven Skaren, by the way, spoiler, went to TSM the next year, got suspended for half of the games in the group due to depends on how you want to phrase this, racist or racial remarks, basically shit talking, but using a bit of a mean angle, a bit of a fucked up angle to someone Asian in solo queue before the Worlds had actually begun, when it was just during the period where you're in the boot camp or whatever. He got heavily penalised, and the penalty was he wouldn't be allowed to play in the first 3 games of the group, which is 1 game against each opponent. That means the first game TSM plays against SK, who had to use Gilius as a stand-in and wasn't a very known player at the time, it's basically a free win. Their best players out. SK Gaming was a team that didn't have that much firepower. They used teamwork. My boy Enrated being a genius. Svenskeren as the best player on the team. He was a dueling jungler, which fucked up the other jungler. So TSM basically gets a free win over one of the 2 best teams in the group. Bearing in mind, TPA is the worst in that regard. So then let's go what happens in the group stage, shall we? So let's go down here. They start out, they beat SK Gaming as predicted. Okay. They go down here. Immediately they lose to Starhorn Royal Club. That's fucking brutal, isn't it? And you know what? Wasn't a close game, actually. Wasn't particularly impressive in any way. So then you go over to day 2. They beat TPA, to be expected. Then they play against TPA again in the next round robin. They beat them again. At this point in time, by the way, they're 4-1 in the group. They're going to make the playoffs anyway. And now, forget 3-1, by the way. But they're in a very good position to get out of the group. And you've still got a game against SK coming up, right? So then you play Starhorn Royal Club and they beat them. Now they're 4-1. Now you could say, fuck, they're supposed to win the group. Then they lose to SK Gaming. That's it. They go 4-2. And in the end, Starhorn Royal Club manages to go 5-1 and they win the group overall. So, okay. When they were 4-1, I can get especially why Amazing and TSM players would be very confident. They would think, we've beaten Starhorn Royal Club finally, the logic being like, this is the real us, and this shows like, you know, what would have happened if we'd have played them again in a tiebreaker, we'd have learned more, and then we maybe even beat them even better using better drafting. So, okay, the question then goes, then why right afterwards do you lose to SK with Svenskeren back? I mean, the logic might be, well, we were looking past them. Look, that does happen when you're in a prime position where you think they're easy to beat. Maybe you beat them in scrims before the tournament. Who the fuck knows? Yeah, I can get their logic, but I don't see it that way. It's like, if you're going to beat Star and Royal Club 2 times in a row and you can't beat SK Gaming 2 times in a row, like, okay. I mean, I don't get it at all, personally. And they're going to go, oh, it's a bad game. Listen, everyone could say that about losses, right? I'll add in a little key detail. Not a lot of people might not know before Worlds, Monty was secretly coaching SK Gaming a little bit. Now, the idea goes, then they'd have had a tiebreaker, right? And because they're going to play a Star Royal Club, if they just beat, they'll beat them again, won't they? Here's what they don't mention. They were stomped by a Star Royal Club the first game. The second game was much closer. The one, the TSM one, it was a 45-minute Baron fight, decided it. And based on how Star Royal Club played after this group stage, well, they got better and better and better and better. So would they have won this tiebreaker against Star Royal Club? I personally say no. But okay, I understand why a TSM player would say they would. Now let's imagine, even if they beat SK Gaming, Star Royal Club, whichever order you want. By the way, I don't know why you get to have 2 best of ones reversed. Like, yeah, not even just 1. You get to have 2 reversed. Maybe TSM could have gone further at Worlds. But I hate to strawberry burst your bubble. But I don't think that's the case. Unless maybe they'd have been energised with the long-lasting, smooth-release energy of GamerSupps, which is sugar-free. Code Thorin, Thorin, for 10% off at GamerSupps.gg. You can also order this Thorin Stort Shaker, which you could put TSM fan tears in, or you could just put some delicious GamerSupps. It's pretty cool, right? Let's say they get to the other side of the bracket, the Chinese and White Shield side of the bracket. Who says they beat EDG? This was a fabulous team. Yeah, they underperformed a bit at this Worlds. They still went to 5 games with the Star Royal Club that made the final. They were still having 1 game in the beginning where Nami actually did pop off a little bit against Sangwai, or at least did good damage. Now, would they have beaten OMG? I think they're on the upside of OMG. Are you kidding me? Good going, cool, and fucking my boy Lovelin, Alan. They would murder TSM. I think they would destroy them, mate. Yes, they're going to say differently from Scrims. I get it. I would say otherwise from the games that we see on stage. Remember, Starhorn Royal Club was a team not even able to speak the same language. They had Korean players who barely speak English, playing with Chinese players who barely speak English, not even trying to communicate in English, speaking in Chinese, and then supposedly they would just ping the Korean players who were the fucking support and jungle in a meta where Dandy and Matt just revolutionised everything. And they just had to ping them and they went around and they just fought and basically were carried by Uzi heavily. The idea idea that EDG and OMG are going to be easier, like, no way, they're way too much for you, in my opinion. I get that Scrim might say you otherwise. Like, Amazing said in the Some of the Insight episode we did that they were scrimming Samsung White every day, that they were the only, like, Western team that Samsung White fucked with, that they were winning a lot of their early games, but then the Matadandi shit would take over and beat them. So, by the way, you're taking credits or you're taking positives from losses there. Listen, that's not terrible, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know that it necessarily works that way overall. You are still losing the Scrim overall. Something is still good. Why are you getting these leads and then losing to Samsung? Okay, anyway, that's by the by, right? I'll just say I'm bringing that up for when you later then say, we could have beat Samsung, right? So, no, exactly. Well, which is it? Pick. Are they the gods and you did well against the gods but still lost? Or were they beatable? In which case, why are you losing all the scrims? But okay, I don't think it would have happened. I think even if they made the other side of the bracket, they don't go any further than round of 8. Amazing, basically, like I said, admitted that the actual LCS playoffs wasn't that crazy. They could have lost to LMQ. Dig was clowns, yes, the series. The series play for this team, because we're talking about them going into series play at Worlds now, was pretty questionable. They didn't look like game to game they did that well in terms of adaptation. They started out poorly in terms of drafts. They had some very off games. They weren't a team that was consistently good or showed this kind of dominant force or played clean kind of League of Legends like it sounds like Amazing once. So let's be real. They got out of a group with no Koreans in it. Well, whoop-de-doo. So then, let's talk quickly about the Samsung White series, shall we? Let's go to here. Samsung White. Now, I will say, if you're going to be on this side of the bracket, yeah, you'd rather get Samsung Blue in theory. Samsung Blue's very good at late game, though, so I don't know how TSM would win that series, but they'll save from Scrims again, blah, blah, blah. So you get Samsung White, yes, the hardest team in the round of 8, but that's because you finished second in a relatively doable group. That's your fault, not fucking my fault, because Samsung White got drawn there, homie. So, okay, this is what happened. They got ultra rocked in the first 2 games. They're less than 30 minutes each, which back then was quick. First one's mega. Second game, Lupa's even playing fucking Cinch. That's not even a meta pick, and they're still winning 2-0. Then, for the third draft, Samsung White just drafted to humiliate TSM and try and 3-0 sweep them. They blind pick Kassadin. They basically taunt Bjergsen into picking any of the strong, like Talon, Zed, whatever. Deficio even comments how the comps have been getting like extremely late game focused from Samsung White. And they've been doing this in each of the series that they're winning in under 30 minutes. And that this one, Jack even says, is excessively so. And they basically try to just humiliate them. So with the worst comp imaginable, pretty much, Samsung White, they lose that game and TSM gets a win. The 4th game's still a win for Samsung White. I think people often confuse that with the Samsung Blue Cloud9 series, where the 4th one was like a weird like base race or something really close. This one actually wasn't that close in the 4th game. They just got swept. They just got taken care of, kicked out the fucking playoffs. That's the end. Now look, Amazing is German. So understand, to him, I get why things like it should have, if we had prepared this way, we could have done this, if we didn't make these mistakes, if people correctly exit. That's just the German way of thinking. I understand that. And it's his way of thinking. Maybe he does think that way. I don't think people like Wild Turtle and fucking Dyrus would make all these super clean plays and smart things like. I don't think Bjergsen at the time wanted assassins but couldn't play as well on them, tried the supportive things but then had to help the rest of the team and have them be the firepower. Wild Turtle, like I said, is a bit brain dead, and then Lost Boy doesn't speak that much English and can't really truly shot call, and then Amazing's only been in the team for 1 fucking split. So I personally just think this is a reach, suggesting they do anything more than this. I think they're already, by the way, it's totally reasonable what happened as it is. They got to beat Star and Roll Cup 1 time, still got through thanks to the Svenskeren. I think, yeah, I still think if Svenskeren turned up, I don't know that Teske actually gets out of the group. I would still probably favour TSM, not least since it could have been a tiebreaker, right? So listen, the group stage meant they had a chance to. The Samsung Blue series maybe could have been interesting. But come on, this is a reach retconning that they could have been in the final of Worlds. This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Iskander, Matt Pugnatio, Rajcula, Thooorin, Travis Goff, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, Joy, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and a special thanks goes out as always to Jerky's Minion, but also to Jeremy Dole. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? You want to ask me a question for one of my video AMAs? Want teasers? Find out who the guests are. Would you like to take part in a lengthy esports discussion with me? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrolluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.